together, heave ho!
What if I told you that the true power of the Egyptian rulers lay not in the height of the pyramids or the wealth of the temples, but in the silent ranks of people whose names have been erased by the sands of time? Many people tend to think that the Pharaoh's army was just a faceless mass, driven to build or defend borders, but the reality was quite different. Behind the golden throne always stood a shadow, a small but impeccably trained group of professionals for whom the ruler's word was more important than their own lives. These people knew no fear, doubt, or fatigue, turning their bodies into perfect instruments for carrying out the orders of a living God. Their training began where ordinary people broke down, and their loyalty was forged in conditions that would seem unimaginable to modern man. History has preserved only fragments of information about these elite units, but even these fragments allow us to piece together a picture of incredible discipline and strength. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how the harsh desert and the most brutal selection process created warriors capable of suppressing the will of entire nations with their mere presence. What if I told you that everything you believed about the personal guards of ancient rulers was untrue? It is commonly believed that the elite always lived a life of luxury in palaces and wore beautiful armor. But for the Pharaoh's guard, the opposite was true. Serving in the ruler's personal guard was not considered a privilege that afforded leisure, but rather a grueling ordeal that lasted a lifetime. These people had no right to a personal life, family, or ambitions as understood by ordinary Egyptians. Their existence was completely subordinated to the Pharaoh's schedule, his movements, and even his sleep. They became a living shield that could not crack under any circumstances. The philosophy of this unit was based on the complete dissolution of the warrior's personality in his sacred duty to the bearer of the double crown. From an early age, candidates were selected not only for their physical attributes, but also for their psychological stability and ability to maintain absolute silence. The ability to keep the secrets of the palace was valued much more highly than the ability to shout loudly or demonstrate one's strength in public. An elite warrior had to be invisible, like a shadow gliding along the columns of the throne room. They were taught to be invisible observers who noticed the slightest change in the situation. Every step of such a guard was calibrated by years of grueling training aimed at controlling their own body and mind. They were forbidden to show emotions, whether anger, joy, or surprise, while performing their duties. A warrior's face had to remain an impenetrable mask, inspiring awe in mere mortals and respect in nobles. Even in moments of extreme tension or danger, their pulse had to remain steady. This was achieved through special meditative practices and prolonged immobility under the scorching sun. Relationships within the unit were based on the principle of absolute brotherhood, where everyone knew that their comrades had their backs. There was no room for competition for rewards or the ruler's attention, as any discord could cost the entire unit its life. They ate from the same pot, slept on hard mats, and shared all the hardships of camp life equally. This unity turned the unit into a single organism that reacted to threats instantly and synchronously. Individualism was not considered a virtue here, but a dangerous vice that was eradicated at the earliest. Particular attention was paid to appearance, which had to demonstrate the impeccability and order that reigned in the state. Their clothes were always perfectly clean, despite the dust of the roads and the sand of the desert, which required enormous effort. Linen skirts were starched in a special way to keep their shape even during rapid movement. Bronze elements of the equipment were polished to a mirror shine, symbolizing the sunlight emanating from the pharaoh. Negligence in clothing was equated with negligence in service and was punished most severely. Interestingly, access to this elite circle was open not only to the Egyptian nobility, but also to distinguished individuals from other classes and even foreigners. The main criterion was not ancestry, but personal qualities and absolute loyalty to the ruling dynasty. This created a unique social ladder where a talented warrior could rise to the heights of power. The pharaohs understood that the loyalty of a mercenary or commoner who owed them everything, was often stronger than the loyalty of an aristocrat with his own ambitions. History knows examples when former guardsmen became trusted advisors and military leaders. However, this social advancement came at a high price, requiring the renunciation of many earthly pleasures. Guardsmen lived in isolated barracks, to which outsiders were strictly forbidden access. Their contact with the outside world was limited to prevent the possibility of bribery or blackmail. Their entire lives took place behind high walls, where their own laws and ideas of honor reigned supreme. They were a state within a state, subordinate only to the will of one man. I would be very interested to hear your opinion on such a system of complete self-sacrifice. What do you think about people who voluntarily turn themselves into living weapons? Write about it in the comments. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next dive into. Are you ready to learn the truth about how the Egyptian army's steel was tempered without a single blacksmith's hammer? The training process for elite warriors took place in conditions that nature itself made unbearable for humans. The training ground was the endless desert with its scorching heat during the day and piercing cold at night. It was here, far from the coolness of the Nile and the shade of date palms, that yesterday's young men were transformed into unyielding fighters. The desert did not forgive mistakes and weakness, quickly weeding out those who did not have sufficient will to live. The basis of physical training was running through deep, shifting sand in full combat gear under the scorching sun. Their feet sank ankle deep into the sand, requiring twice as much effort from their muscles with each step. Their breathing was labored by the hot air that burned their lungs and dried out their throats. Such forced marches could last for hours, fostering phenomenal endurance and patience. Those who fell remained lying down, as it was unacceptable for the entire detachment to stop for one person. Water was strictly rationed, teaching the body to function in a mode of strict resource conservation. Soldiers learned to suppress their thirst, concentrating only on completing the task at hand. This skill was critical for military campaigns through the arid lands of Canaan or Nubia. The ability to walk an extra 10 kilometers without a sip of water was often a decisive factor in maneuver warfare. Those who could not control their needs were considered unreliable. In addition to running, great attention was paid to developing strength and coordination through weight training. Stones of various shapes and weights were used as training equipment, which had to be lifted, carried, and held at arm's length. Exercises with palm trunks developed teamwork, as several people had to lift a heavy trunk in unison. Each movement was honed to perfection, so that in battle the muscles would react faster than the mind. A special stage of training was learning to navigate in terrain where there were no obvious landmarks. A warrior had to be able to read the signs of the desert, the direction of the wind by the ripples in the sand, the proximity of water by the color of rare plants. The night sky became a map for them, by which they could unerringly find their way in complete darkness. This turned them into ideal scouts, capable of appearing where the enemy did not expect them at all. This training system, honed over centuries, created people whose physical abilities seemed supernatural to ordinary people. They could run faster than chariots, carry loads heavier than their own weight, and fight for hours without rest. The desert took away everything superfluous, leaving only pure functionality in a will of steel. Have you ever wondered if modern methods can achieve the same results without the use of technology? Want to know a secret that will change your perception of ancient weapons? When we talk about the weapons of the Egyptian elite, we immediately imagine the famous hopsh. However, it was not just a weapon, but a complex engineering tool, each curve of which had its own practical purpose. The hopsh was not forged like medieval swords, but cast from bronze, which required the highest skill of metallurgists. This metal was heavy, but it was its weight, combined with its unique shape, that made the weapon so effective in skilled hands. The shape of the hopsh resembled a sickle, but it was sharpened on the outer, convex side of the blade. This allowed powerful chopping blows to be delivered using the inertia of the heavy curved part. At the same time, the inner part of the blade could be used to hook enemy shields or pull weapons out of their hands. An elite warrior had to master both techniques perfectly, turning combat into a continuous dance. The weapon became not just a piece of metal, but an extension of the arm, allowing the warrior to control the distance. Training in the use of the hopes began with wooden models, which were heavier than the combat originals. This was done in order to strengthen the wrists and forearms, which bore the main load when rotating the blade. A warrior had to be able to deliver a series of strikes from different angles without losing balance or opening himself up to counterattacks. For hours, recruits practiced the same movements in the air until their muscles memorized the trajectory at the reflex level. The shield was no less important an element of equipment than the sword, and working with it required a separate skill. Egyptian shields of that time were made of wood covered with bull hide and had a rounded top. The elite used the shield not only for passive defense, but also as a striking weapon in close combat. The ability to put the edge of the shield in the right place at the right time, or to push an opponent with it. In addition to the hopashi, the guard's arsenal included battle axes with semicircular or fan-shaped blades. These axes were designed to break through light armor and wooden shields. They required less finesse to wield than a sword, but more physical strength to swing effectively. The axe was a breakthrough weapon used in the front lines of attacking formations. Thus, the elite's armament was not just a set of tools, but an entire system integrated into their fighting style. The combination of heavy bronze, thoughtful design, and virtuoso technique made them dangerous opponents for any army of the time. If you like the description of this unique weapon, give it a like. What if I showed you a time machine that would transport us to a battlefield where perfect order reigned? The tactics of the Egyptian elite were radically different from the chaotic skirmishes of the tribal armies of the time. They fought not as a crowd of lone heroes, but as a single, monolithic mechanism controlled by a single will. The basis of their tactics was a dense formation resembling a phalanx, where each warrior protected his neighbor with his shield. This wall of shields and spears could withstand the onslaught of superior enemy forces. Discipline in the ranks was ironclad. No warrior had the right to take a step forward or backward without a command. Movement was carried out to the rhythm of drums or trumpet signals, which allowed the formation to be maintained even on rough terrain. This synchronized action exerted powerful psychological pressure on the enemy, who saw before them not people, but an inexorable force. The ability to maintain order in the chaos of battle was the main advantage of a professional. Elite units were often used as a striking force in the center or as a reserve brought into battle at a decisive moment. They could stand for hours under archer fire without moving, waiting for the perfect moment to counterattack. Their endurance allowed commanders to implement complex tactical plans without fear of the formation faltering. It was on their shoulders that the stability of the entire Pharaoh's army rested. Particular attention was paid to the interaction of different types of troops within a tactical unit. Spearmen covered archers, who fired over their shoulders, creating a zone of continuous destruction. When the enemy approached closely, the archers retreated through gaps in the formation, and fighters with hoplites and axes moved forward. This change of positions was rehearsed until it became automatic, so that there would be no delays or crowding. This complex choreography of death was the result of endless training on the parade ground. Soldiers knew their place in the ranks as well as they knew their own names. It was this organization, and not just personal bravery, that made them invincible. Did you know how the Egyptians coped with the terrible heat in such dense formations? In the next chapter, you will learn how they used their knowledge of the desert to survive. The Medjay, legendary scouts and guardians of the desert, occupied a special place in the military hierarchy of ancient Egypt. Originally, they were descendants of Nubian tribes who were hired to serve the pharaoh thanks to their unique tracking skills. Over time, the term Medjay came to refer to an elite special forces unit that performed police, intelligence, and border guard functions. These people were born in the sands and felt the desert like no one else. Their main weapons were their powers of observation and their ability to read tracks that were invisible to the average person. The Medjay could determine the size of a group, the time of its passage, and even the load carried by the people from barely noticeable indentations in the sand. They knew all the secret paths, water sources, and possible ambush sites in the wildest corners of the country. Neither a fugitive criminal nor an enemy spy could escape their watchful gaze. The Medjay often operated in small mobile groups, patrolling vast areas around necropolises and palaces. They were the first to encounter threats, and their task was not so much to engage in open combat as to alert the main forces. Their tactics were based on surprise, speed, and using the terrain for cover. They could lie motionless in ambush for days, blending into the landscape, waiting for their target. Their duties included guarding the Valley of the Kings and the tomb construction sites, which required exceptional reliability. The Medjay checked all workers and craftsmen, preventing any attempts at theft or desecration of sacred places. Their power in the territory entrusted to them was absolute, and even nobles were forced to obey their demands. They were the guarantors of the peace of the deceased pharaohs and the safety of the living. The Medjay's weapons were lighter than those of the line infantry, so as not to hinder their movements during long patrols. They preferred bows, long staffs, and light axes, relying on agility and range combat. Trained dogs, which often accompanied the patrols, played a special role. These animals were faithful assistants in searching for and pursuing intruders. Their role in the history of Egypt cannot be overestimated, as they were the ones who ensured the internal stability of the state. Without their invisible work, the great construction projects and peaceful life of the cities would have been impossible. The Medjay were the invisible framework that held the empire's security together. Are you ready for the shocking truth about the most expensive and complex weapon of the Bronze Age? Chariots, or Marianu, were not just a means of transportation. Only a member of the nobility with sufficient means to maintain horses and equipment could become a charioteer or chariot archer. They were the aristocracy of war, the elite within the elite, whose power on the battlefield was devastating. The Egyptian chariot was incredibly light and maneuverable compared to the heavy carts of its neighbors. Made of bent wood, leather, and woven elements, it weighed so little that it could be lifted by one person. This allowed it to develop tremendous speed and make sharp turns without the risk of overturning. Egyptian engineering created the ideal platform for mobile ships. The crew consisted of two people, a driver who controlled the horses and a warrior who fired a bow or threw javelins. The understanding between them had to be telepathic. The driver had to sense the moment to accelerate or turn in order to give the archer the best angle of fire. Any lack of coordination at high speed could lead to disaster. Chariot archers used powerful composite bows capable of piercing armor at a considerable distance. Shooting from a moving platform at a moving target required years of... They learned to compensate for the shaking with their knees, turning their bodies into living stabilizers. The effectiveness of such fire was terrifying for the enemy. The tactics of using chariots resembled those of modern aviation or light tanks. They began the battle by raining arrows down on the enemy, disrupting their ranks and sowing panic. The chariots circled around the enemy's formation, not engaging in close combat, but constantly threatening to break through. If the enemy infantry faltered, the chariots crashed into the gaps, completing the rout. History remembers many battles where it was the swift strike of chariots that decided the outcome. They were a symbol of the new kingdom, an era of conquest and imperial grandeur. And what role do you think magic played in protecting the pharaoh? In the next chapter, you will learn how spells were combined with swords.
Protect the divine ruler. Weave the magic.
For the ancient Egyptians, the world was not limited to physical reality. It was permeated with magic and divine presence. Therefore, the pharaoh's protection could not be ensured by swords and shields alone. Spiritual armor was also required. The guards surrounding the ruler were not only warriors, but also, in a sense, priests initiated into the mysteries of protecting a sacred person. Their equipment and even their bodies were covered with amulets designed to ward off evil, both physical and magical. Each piece of armor could bear protective hieroglyphs or images of patron gods, such as Montu or Sekhmet. These symbols were believed to create an invisible barrier around the warrior and his master. Before taking up their posts, special purification rituals were performed, including ablutions and the recitation of spells. A guard could not approach the pharaoh while ritually unclean, as this could disrupt the harmony of Ma'at. Particular attention was paid to guarding the pharaoh's sleep, when, according to belief, his soul traveled to other worlds. The guards at the bedroom had to maintain absolute silence and mental concentration, warding off the evil spirits of the night. This was a time of utmost tension when physical vigilance was combined with mystical awe. They guarded not just a sleeping man, but the gateway through which divine power entered the world. Amulets in the form of the Eye of Horus, Ujat, or the Knot of Isis, in Tet, were an essential part of their equipment. They were worn around the neck, on the wrists, or woven into the hair. Belief in the power of these objects gave the warriors additional confidence in their own invulnerability. Psychologically, this worked as a powerful factor in suppressing the fear of death. Thus, an elite warrior was a defender in two worlds at once. His sword protected the pharaoh's body, and his faith and purity of thought protected his spirit. This combination made their service unique in the ancient world.
The perimeter is secure, Commander.
Good. Double the watch on the eastern
The
wall.
Egyptian army's military camp was a model of order and organization, where every detail was thought out to the smallest detail. When the army stopped for the night, the first thing they did was to erect a temporary
Sentries,
fortified
take your
perimeter
posts
made
and
of
maintain
shields,
vigilance.
carts, and embankments. Inside this perimeter, a veritable city of tents sprang up, arranged strictly according to hierarchy and functional purpose. The elite units were always located in the center, around the pharaoh's tent, forming the last ring of defense. Supply logistics was one of the strongest aspects of the Egyptian military machine. The army was followed by caravans of donkeys and carts loaded with grain, water, and ammunition. Scribe kept strict records of every sack of flour and every jug of beer to prevent theft and food shortages. The ration system was standardized. Soldiers received bread, dried vegetables, and, when possible, meat or fish to maintain their strength. Hygiene in the camp was maintained at a surprisingly high level for that time. There were specially designated areas for waste, located downwind and away from water sources. Soldiers were required to keep their bodies and clothes clean to avoid diseases that could wipe out the army faster than the enemy. Barbers and doctors were an integral part of the military contingent. Repair shops were set up immediately after the camp was established. Armorers sharpened blades, leather workers repaired sandals and belts, and carpenters repaired chariots. Work continued non-stop so that by morning, the army would be fully combat ready. Every soldier knew that his equipment had to be flawless. The daily routine on the march was strict: early rising before dawn, a quick breakfast, and breaking camp. The speed with which the Egyptian army could assemble and set out often took its enemies by surprise. Elite units set the pace for the entire movement, setting an example of discipline.
We march now.
The Egyptian army had a clear, understandable system of rewards that motivated soldiers to perform feats of valor.
Legion honors you.
Unlike many other ancient societies where status was determined by birth, here the path to the top was open to the
Has earned you this honor.
elite soldiers who distinguished themselves in battle could count on generous rewards and promotion. This meritocracy made the army effective and loyal.
And bravery.
One of the most prestigious awards was the Gold of Bravery, necklaces in the form of golden flies. The flies symbolized persistence and tenacity, as this insect cannot be driven away. It returns again and again. Receiving such an award from the pharaoh himself was the highest honor, about which legends were composed. The owners of the golden flies enjoyed enormous respect in society. In addition to jewelry, distinguished warriors received land grants, slaves, and a share of the spoils of war. This allowed veterans to secure a comfortable old age and raise the social status of their families. Yesterday's commoner could become a wealthy landowner thanks to his valor. The prospect of enrichment was a powerful incentive to take risks. There were special titles such as First Among the Brave or Bearer of the King's Sandals, which indicated a special closeness to the ruler. These people were part of the inner circle of confidants and often carried out delicate assignments. Their influence at court could be significant. The final stage of service for the most trusted and experienced guards was guarding the necropolises. The Valley of the Kings, where the mummies of the great rulers rested, was an area of the strictest secret. Guarding the peace of the dead was considered an even more responsible task than guarding the living, for it was a matter of eternity. These people became living shadows among the dead rocks. The Necropolis Guard Detachment lived in isolated settlements, such as Deir el-Medina, with virtually no contact with the outside world. They knew the location of hidden entrances to tombs, traps, and hiding places. This knowledge was deadly dangerous, and disclosure of the secret was punishable by immediate death. Their silence was the key to preserving the nation's treasures. Their duty was to constantly patrol the rocky paths under the scorching sun and in the cold of the desert nights. They looked for traces of robbers and checked the integrity of the seals on the doors of the tombs. Every displaced stone or extraneous sound elicited an immediate response. It was an endless war against greed and sacrilege. Psychologically, it was extremely difficult work, requiring them to stay in places that ordinary Egyptians considered frightening. The guards lived side by side with death, surrounded by the mystical silence of the tombs. They believed that they were protected not only by the walls, but also by the spirits of the deceased pharaohs they served. In times of turmoil and weak central authority, these guards were often the last bastion of order. There are known cases when they fought superior gangs of robbers, protecting the legacy of their kings. Their loyalty extended beyond the life of the ruler himself. We have lifted the veil of secrecy on those who stood guard over the golden throne of Egypt for centuries. The pharaoh's elite warriors were not just soldiers, but a unique caste of people who combined physical perfection, iron discipline, and deep spirituality. Their lives were a continuous feat of self-sacrifice for the higher goal of preserving the divine order on earth. From grueling training in the scorching sands to silent duty at the entrance to the tombs, their every step was imbued with duty and honor. The history of these people proves that the true strength of an army lies not only in its weapons, but also in the spirit of those who wield them. They left no memoirs behind, but their legacy lives on in the majestic monuments they defended and in the legends that have survived the centuries. Egyptian civilization was able to survive for so long largely thanks to this indestructible living shield. What other secrets of ancient armies would you like to uncover? Perhaps you are interested in the legions of Rome or the immortals of the Persian Empire. Write your suggestions in the comments, and we will definitely make the next episode about them. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click on the bell so that history comes alive on your screens.